What's up, YouTube? This is Matt Brown coming at you with another IoT hacking video. Today, we are going to take a look at this same router we've taken a look at in a couple of my previous videos, but today we're going to go for the nuclear option. We are going to extract the firmware from this system by chip off firmware extraction. That's right, we are going to use a hot air rework station to pull the flash chip off of this board, and then we are going to read that flash memory with a universal programmer. I want to thank everyone who has been subscribing to my YouTube channel, liking my videos, leaving comments on what you want to see next. Please continue to do that in this video as well. And without further ado, we're going to head over to the workbench and start getting this chip off the board. So let's switch over to our desk camera, and we're going to lay down our board here. So I've got a couple things on the desk we're going to introduce right now. We have our Linux router that we have looked at in a couple of videos. We have the flash chip right here. We're going to take a closer look at that with a microscope in a minute, but me having worked with a number of these boards before, my eyes are immediately drawn to this chip. I know this is the flash chip. That just comes from an experience of knowing what type of integrated circuit package types are common for a flash chip as opposed to, say, the main memory chips or the CPU chips, or this might be some microcontroller because this is a DSL router. I don't know, but I do know that this is my flash chip that I'm going to be targeting today. Also on the desk, I have the XGecu. I don't know what you guys call this thing, but that's what I call it. This is a universal programmer made in China and has some sketchy software that we will talk about later that goes with this. But this is what's going to allow us, once we pull this chip off this board, we're going to set it into this socket, and it's going to connect into this system and allow us to read the firmware contents of that chip. So with that, we are going to take a closer look under the microscope. And I'm going to turn my microscope ring light on, and here we're going to get the flash chip underneath our microscope, and you can kind of make out some of the text on this chip, but for anyone out there who has a microscope, I'm going to go ahead and show you all a little pro tip. So this LED ring light that I have on this microscope is great, but in this case it is shining the light directly down and reflecting directly back up into my microscope, and that's why it's really hard to make out the text that is on this flash chip. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to turn that light all the way down, and then I'm going to use a flashlight and point it sideways. And when I do that, I'm able to read this chip very easily. So now I can read this, and I already have that open in my web browser on my other screen that we will have at the ready when we go and look at the universal programmer software. But suffice it to say that we can write this down for later. So I'm going to turn the ring light back on, and now we are going to prepare to take this chip off of the board. So off on my desk to the left, I do have a hot air rework station. It is set to, I actually don't know. So the thing with hot air that you got to understand is that the temperature that it says it is really only part of the equation for how fast you're going to be able to pull this chip off of the board. Also, the distance of your hot air gun and the airspeed are also going to play a factor, and you really just have to get a feel for your equipment. I know what settings will pull this chip off well. And the other thing I'm going to use is this Amtech flux that you got to see a look at a little bit better under the wider camera shot. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay down a good base of this flux all around our chip there. So, another thing that before I pull this chip off, that is a good thing to make a note of, because this is a type of chip that I can easily reattach to this system so that it will continue to function after I have extracted the firmware off of it. And I could potentially modify firmware and, place the flash chip back on. And so we want to note here that, okay, so there's a pin 1 indicator up here on the left, and then the chip itself has a pin 1 indicator. Okay, that's great. But we also want to make note of this interesting fact that this is a 56 pin, there's 56 pads on this board, but it's only a 48 pin chip. And so we just want to remember that we have 2 pin slots, above the chip and below the chip on both sides. So we will note that for later. So now I'm going to, in one hand, hold my hot air gun. I prefer to do that in my off hand. I am left-handed, but I just like to have the control on my tweezers. So one hand, I got my hot air. The other hand, I got my tweezers. And we are going to start applying heat. So it's generally a good idea to try to apply heat like generally around the area of the circuit board, not just the chip you're trying to heat up. But that is a good thing to do, to get a general area of heat around the chip. And then as I go, I'm just going to keep adding a little bit more flux. I'm probably doing good for now, but really just trying to hammer this chip with some heat. Not too much. Don't want to get too close. And the other thing that you really don't want to do is I don't want to pull with these tweezers. When it's ready to come off, it will slide right off. And if I pull, I risk pulling up pads, which would jeopardize any chance I have at reattaching this chip, if that's something I desire to do. And now that my hot air station is all the way up, I can tell you that I have it set to 390 Celsius. And I have some level of airspeed that's like decent. I'm going to add some more flux. And I'm actually going to turn on. I just got a little air vent back here to try to keep all these fumes out of my face. Continuing to apply heat. I'm going to go try to heat up one side, then the other. See how we're doing. Little tug. Nothing happening. Let's give it some more flux. Big old puff of smoke. This old solder has probably been sitting on this board forever. So when we reattach the chip after we extract the firmware, we will use some good lead-based solder. I always find these chips are really hard to pull off when they have that crappy lead-free solder that's usually used. Okay, I got a little bit there. I don't want to get greedy and try to pull it off prematurely. Like I said, I could definitely risk pulling a pad off there if I do that. Ooh, I'm close. Okay. Just don't want to. Yeah, you can tell you're close when you really start to see the solder on either side get nice and shiny. Oh, I got a little flex, but again, don't want to get greedy. Don't want to pull a pad off. Gonna throw some more flux on. Just go a little bit longer. Yeah, this right side is looking nice and good there. Okay, that right side's coming off. It's this left side that's giving me trouble. A little bit more heat on this. Oh man, it's so close. Okay, gonna go more flux, which will give us more fumes. I cannot stress that it is a good idea. Cannot stress enough that it is a good idea that you have some form of fume extraction available to you. Okay, yeah, see, like that one side's wanting to come up, but the other side, it's not gonna happen if the other side is not also good to go. Okay, I have one side of the chip off, and now we have both. So there's our chip. It's nice and hot. And so now what we're going to do, I'm going to move the board out of the way. So this chip is still, let me move to a clean spot on my work surface here. So this chip is still extremely hot. So I don't want to immediately apply my my isopropyl alcohol to this that we're going to use to clean this chip off. So I'm going to let it sit for a minute. I sometimes will even I'm going to set this chip up next to my fume extractor and kind of just like let the airflow maybe help us out. I'm going to drop the chip. So, alright. I think I've waited a little bit. Now I'm going to just, I've got a Q-tip here with isopropyl alcohol on it. And I'm going to, and you can see how it's evaporating off of there so quickly. That means that this chip is still got some heat on it. But I think we are ready to start cleaning this. So I want to get the top and the bottom. And I'm even gonna make a nice clean spot on my work surface here. Put the chip back under the microscope so you can see that. I'll usually go through just a few Q-tips in this process. Yep, and you can definitely get the cotton in the Q-tips caught on the leads. So don't want to avoid that if at all possible. All right, so we're gonna flip this back over to the top and go like one more Q-tip. And now what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna throw some more hot air at that, and we'll see all that isopropyl just kind of evaporate off. So here is our flash chip. There it is, folks. And now what we're gonna do, and the microscope really helps us here. I can turn off my fume extraction. And we're gonna zoom in, try to stay in focus. And so when I pulled this off, you'll notice over here on some of these legs that we still have some solder there that is bridging the connection between those legs. So we are going to zoom back out. Give you guys the best view of this operation. So the next step is what we're going to do is we're going to remove that solder with some good old solder braid and our soldering iron. So going to just cut me off a piece of that solder braid. And now I'm going to start just over here on the left side, although I think the left side came off pretty clean. There's still sometimes solder on there, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply the side of my iron with the braid. I gotta get a good angle here. There we go. And I'll see some smoke, which means it's doing its job. See some silver on the braid, means that it's taken some of that solder off of our chip. Alright, I think we're good on that side. Like I said, I can look in that microscope. That gives us a crystal clear view that that side is good. Now this other side, on the other hand, definitely got some bridges that we're going to want to get rid of. So I'm just going to try to move that down along the side. Let's see what shape that leaves us in. That looks solid. All right. So now what we're going to do, the best I can, I'm going to try to show you this on the desk cam. So now we've got our flash chip, we've got the socket, and we've got our reader. So this socket is going to tell us where it wants pin 1, and I can show that for you right here. So it's gonna want us to put pin 1 as high as we can up there. So this reader supports up to a 56 pin chip, and so there's going to be some spare room on the bottom. And so I'll just try to show you that the best I can, but you're just going to have to trust me that that is going in there smooth. Alright. Actually, I'm going to try to use the microscope to confirm, because I am not confident that that is in there correctly. Alright, I'm going to have to refocus this. Yep, nope, I'm not on. Actually, give me some zoom here. Okay, that side is good. And that side is good too. And that's what we should see. We should see 4 empty pin rows on both sides, and then everything is in parallel. All right. Again, microscope coming in clutch. So now that we've got our socket in here, similarly, you can see there's a number 1 up here, and then on the reader, I've got a pin indicator here that says like pin 1 should be up here towards the top. So I'm gonna flip this guy up to unlock. Does not fit well, but there we go. Now our socket is in the reader, our chip is in the socket, and we are ready to go. Okay, we are now over at our computer and just wanted to show you this website. This is the official website, as sketchy as it looks, for our universal programmer device. This device ships from China. There might be some places in the US to buy it, but I would be wary of that because there are counterfeits of this universal programmer. And this even sketchier link here takes you to where you download the Windows only software for this universal programmer. So, but not all is lost, because this awesome individual right here wrote this program that will allow you to run this under Wine. So he has everything you need if you follow these instructions, the UDEV rules, and the wrapper for the USB driver in Windows, so that you can do this. You can run in Wine this software, which is just impeccable, just an impeccable graphical interface here. But that's what we have to work with, and we have located, based on that information we pulled off the chip earlier, of the device model number that is printed on the flash chip. We can search in this interface and we can find the chip we were looking for. Sometimes a model number will have multiple manufacturers that match that model number, but our chip was made by ST, and then it'll give you more options here. And so this one's easy though, because our chip is a 48-pin chip, and that's the only option listed here is this GX, and that does match what we put into here. So we will just select that chip, and then what we're gonna do is we're going to encounter a little error here, but I want to show you what it looks like. So if I were to go now and attempt to read this chip's contents, I go in here, I click read, and it's going to say it's got some found a bad pin. You know, do you want to keep going? And we can cancel that operation, and then we'll go back. And so, okay, so let's disable this pin detect option here, and we will then see what happens. So gonna hit read again, read, and now this check ID failed. So it's reading a value here, and I'm optimistic at this point. So it is giving me an error, but this error is not like check ID is FFFF or 0000. So that tells me that it's actually reading something. It's actually interacting with the chip in some way to get me this ID value. But it's just not the ID value it expected based on the configuration for this chip. But that is something that I find commonly with this universal programmer. So not to worry, we just go back here and we disable this check ID value. And so the rest of these values should be good to go. Oh, another thing to note is that this device info oftentimes gives inaccurate information on how to configure this the chip in here. I think this one is primarily wrong because this reader for this newer universal programmer supports up to 56 pins, and this only shows you up to 48. But you just kind of keep guessing until you figure it out. But now we'll go in here and we'll click read, and we'll read, and there's a progress bar. And we go back, and there we go. There you have it, folks. We have the data from the flash chip all there for our wonderful review. So now I can go and I can click save, and it shows me where in my based on the wine location that this file is. and I can save that file off somewhere else and analyze it with a tool like binwalk or various other firmware analysis tools. So now what we're going to do, now we have our firmware. We've extracted it off our chip. Now we want to get this device operational again. And so now we're going to go back to our desk and we are going to attempt to reattach this firmware chip and make the device function once again. So now we're going to transition back to the desk. We'll move our microscope off to the side. For now, we will need that later. So we're going to turn off our universal programmer here. We're going to pull the socket out. We're going to pull the chip off of here. And we're going to bring our board back into view. So what do we got here? Let's spin the microscope back around and take a look. Well, what we do have is a lot of flux all over this board. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to get more Q-tips with our isopropyl alcohol, and we're going to attempt to collect a bunch of this gunk that is now accumulated on here. This is going to take multiple Q-tips to get all this off of here, and that's because I used a quite excessive amount of flux when extracting this off. But that flux does help us pull the chip off quicker, so it is worth it. You know, we're just gonna kind of dump, and you notice like I'm dealing with a mess all over here. Just gonna kind of dump isopropyl alcohol all over here, and we're just gonna kind of scrub. Just gonna scrub. I mean, really, we only need to clear a path for our flash chip, but I do like to clean up as much of the flux from other places. Like here, I got some over here on our memory, our main memory. Okay. Yeah, we're getting a lot off of there. Okay. I'll leave some of that as a job for later. All right, just gonna really focus on where our flash chip is gonna land here. So now I've got a bunch of isopropyl alcohol. That's an easy thing. I can just throw some hot air over our board to make that all evaporate and go away. Except for the flux that is still there. That is not going anywhere. But we will be using more flux before we are through here. So now what we're going to do, speak of that flux, I'm actually going to throw down more flux, just a targeted amount right over where these solder pads are. So I mentioned that I have a good reason to believe that this solder here is lead-free solder. It's gross. It does not melt well. And so I'm going to take all of that off. And so now I've got my soldering iron. Going to turn on my fume extractor. And I'm going to just take my wick here. Get it heated up. I'm just going to drag it all along there until it's nice and flat. We pulled all our solder off there. It's probably best practice to run with these pads, not against them, so as to not pull them off of the board. So there we go. Now I'm going to do the bottom ones. Get my wick. Heat it up. Alright. And And again, we're going to be cognizant of the fact that there's going to be two pins on either side, two pads rather, that are not occupied by pins because of that difference between the 56 pads and 48 pin chip. Okay, got a little bit more solder over here. Alright, but that looks pretty good. And so I'm just going to go a little bit more isopropyl and clean up, because that wick also has some impurities. You can see all that gross stuff that's on the end of our Q-tip. Okay, so we're cleaning again. So now I took all that solder off there, and I'm going to take some of my own leaded solder, and I'm going to apply it to here. So you would think, oh wow, this is going to be really hard. It's going to be hard to solder to all of these 24 pins on this one side. Let's get that in focus for you. But it is not, because of the power of flux. So I'll do this one side first. So I'm going to lay down some flux there. And then we're simply going to take our soldering iron, just kind of put some solder on it, and like magic, we're going to just run it across. We're going to drag solder this thing. A little bit more. I might have had too much. Yep, I got too much there. I can just go like that. Look at that. It cleans up. Just like that. That is the power of flux, folks. There we go. And again, this microscope is awesome. And I can just zoom in and examine all of my areas there to make sure that they're free of any bridges. I can turn my light down to get a little better view. So that looks great. Nothing wrong there. Now we're going to do the other side. So again, lay down just a little bit of flux, the proper amount of flux, as Rossmann would say. And drag across. Oh, it's beautiful. There we go. Okay, we got a little more there. And what the heck, I'll put solder on those other pads, even though we're not going to use them, just for completeness. So now we've got solder, and we need our chip again. So we need to find that pin 1 indicator that we saw before. There it is. There's our dot. So that's our pin 1 indicator, and that is going to match up with our little dot there. So it's going to look something like this. Dot's connected to the dot. I'm going to rotate this just so it's easier for me. Try to have it all in view. And now we're going to apply some heat. We're going to apply heat. I'm going to kind of just place the chip over top where I want it to be, but it's not gonna be perfect. And then I'm gonna throw down some flux on the side here, because again, we're gonna end up using a little bit of flux for this process of to reattach the chip. So just gonna try to get this heating up on both sides. I'm gonna actually get a zoom going here that's a little bit better. I have actually reattached chips like this without a microscope, and I can say that it is way nicer with the microscope. I'm going to try to bump it into place. Ah. Yeah, I really just need to get like an okay starting point. So that's not perfect, but the flux and the solder when it starts to flow, that's what's really gonna do the job for us. So now I'm just gonna focus on getting the heat applied to those pins and those pads. Get some more light up in here. Okay, that's so close that I think if I get the left one heated up, I think it'll pull right into place. I mean, it's like right there. It's not perfect, but it's good enough to be connected, and I see daylight in between all my pins. That's the real benefit this microscope gives you. You just get to see that daylight, that green in between your silver, and you know you're good to go. All right. So I think we're heated up on both sides. All right. I'm gonna let her cool. So I still have my UART pins right here. And so that will allow us to perform the final test. And we will get to see if we've connected this properly. So I'm gonna, just make sure the bird support's powered off while this thing's cooling down. Let's switch back to our desk cam and turn our fume extractor off. All right. So I got power, and now my UART connector somewhere back here. We're gonna plug this back in. There we go. All right, moment of truth. All right, I got over here on our screen, we've got our Picocom terminal sitting ready to go. And I'm going to turn the board on in 3, 2, 1. And we did it. So there we go. It's booting just like the flash chip had never been removed. It's back. So that's chip-off firmware extraction with a universal programmer, hot air rework of a flash chip on an embedded Linux system. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I really enjoy everyone's feedback. This has been a fun process to create these videos and put them out into the world. Let me know in the comments what you want to see in the future, if you liked this, if you didn't, and please hit me up on social media if you have any questions. Have a great day.